Hello everybody, we're going to jump right into today's video. Cells and tissues, talking about cartilage. This will be hopefully a quicker one-parter video. So talking about cartilage, we're going to talk about kind of its classification, the three different components, the different types of cartilage, characteristics, as well as kind of the functions, locations of each of the different types, and then the process by which it grows. Very similar to the bone lecture, just not quite as lengthy. So, looking at why it's classified as a connective tissue, obviously like the structure of it in general, with the cells, the extracellular matrix having fibers and ground substance, very much like all the other connective tissues that we have looked at. We will look at also how kind of it differs from other connective tissues, its function and development. Okay, so talking about the three different types of cartilage, we see hyaline cartilage, elastic cartilage, and fibrocartilage. We are going to break down each of these, kind of what their characteristics are, what they do, where they're found, all that kind of stuff later on. Here's just a little overview, kind of what we're going to be looking at, the different types with elastic type cartilage, fibrocartilage here, and then the hyaline cartilage up there. So just a little bit of kind of review, these kind of things, just so that we remember some of our definitions, some of our terminology, that kind of stuff. I have all written down here, just a little brief explanation of each part of these, but we look at, the ground substance, the water content, the cartilage, lacking specific tissues, like lacking the nerve endings, it lacks direct vasculature as well as lymphatics. We'll see why or how it's able to get away with that in a minute. Again, just a little bit of more intro kind of stuff. We have different types of cells, chondroblasts, chondrocytes, and then the actual cartilage itself. Different types of matrix, we'll talk about that later on in the PowerPoint. Just remembering chondroblast, blasts are builder cells. They build, they create stuff. In this case, they're making cartilage. The chondrocytes, just like osteocytes, they are the cartilage cells. Okay. A little more background before we jump into the actual components of cartilage. Perichondrium. Anytime that you see that base word chondrocyte, chondrium, that's going to be our cartilage stuff, chondroblast. Okay, that's cartilage. Peri, if you remember from the bone lecture, like periosteum, we have perichondrium. The periosteum was what surrounded the outside of the bone and had those different layers. It had a fibrous layer and an osteogenic layer. Perichondrium is very, very similar. It's a layer of dense, irregular connective tissue that surrounds the cartilage structures. It's where we're getting that nourishment, the stem cells, and protecting and supporting the cartilage. This is where, like I said, the cartilage itself lacks nerve endings, it lacks vasculature, it lacks lymphatics. The perichondrium that's surrounding it, that's where we find all of that stuff to allow the cartilage to receive some of the nutrients and stuff that it needs in order to continue to be healthy and to thrive. Again, just like the periosteum, the perichondrium has a fibrous outer layer made up of fibroblasts and type 1 collagen, and it has an inner layer, a chondrogenic zone, where we're actively growing and producing more chondroblasts. When we talk about the makeup of cartilage, something that's really, really, really important are these things called GAGs, glycosaminoglycans. We've talked about these before. We touched on them briefly in a previous lecture. This was in before exam 1. These are large carbohydrates which are made by repeating disaccharide units. I'm going to kind of jump back and forth between pictures here. So we have either these N-acetylglucosamines or N-acetylgalactosamines. If we break those down, acetyl being an acetyl group, and think back to our biochemistry here, glucose. So we have an acetyl group, a glucose, and then an amine or an amino acid. So acetyl, glucose, amine. Those three things combined together form one of these sugars. Then we also have an acetyl galactose amine, which again, acetyl galactose being another type of sugar, amine amino acid. So this amino sugar combines with a uronic acid most often. The two types of uronic acid that we can see are glucuronic acid and if I can pronounce it, ioduronic acid. There we go. So again, iodine-based, glucose-based, and these repeat. This is a disaccharide, so these things two come together, and they link over and over and over again. Pairs of these, pair, all throughout here, in order to form this long chain. And these are they're hydrophilic, so they attract lots of water, and they create a hydrated, gelatinous environment in which the collagen and elastic fibers become embedded. So that's why our collagen is highly hydrated, lots of water inside of it. Okay. Many of these gags, the glycosaminoglycans that are in these many gags in the extracellular matrix are bound to protein molecules to form proteoglycans, such as chondroitin sulfate, keratin sulfate, and hyaluronic acid. And we're going to take a look at that. So we get these pairs, we make these chains. These chains, these carbohydrate chains, covalently bond to a core protein, and that forms a proteoglycan. Okay? Even bigger than that, we have these core proteins, we have all of these different carbohydrates, these gags binding to here, right, all through here. And oftentimes those will bind to something slightly bigger, like a hyaluronic acid. We talk a lot about hyaluronic acid, and that's very, very often asked on test questions because that's one of the most common components that you see with gags, with proteoglycans, with these whole structures when we're talking about cartilage. So remember that word. If anything, when you're asked a question about, hey, which of these is a part of cartilage, or specifically the cartilage makeup, or the cartilage matrix, that's the word that we're looking for, that hyaluronic acid backbone, that hyaluronic acid proteoglycan, glucose aminoglycan, something along those lines. That's one of the keywords we're looking for. And here's just kind of walking through that. That hyaluronic acid is a GAG, which is composed of the long chain repeating disaccharides, and many of the proteoglycans associate with hyaluronate backbone to form proteoglycan hyaluronate complex. And that's what this picture was of. Also have another picture of it here later on as well. You don't need to know all of the specifics about, what's linked where, how it's all connected. Most of these pictures are just to kind of give you a better idea of what we're looking at. So this whole structure, its function is to bring water. So it brings water, holds on to water. It's very hydrophilic, so loves water. So it holds on to water and keeps water inside of the cartilage in order to help with dealing with stress, especially like impact type stress. And we'll see that in a minute. So here we go. So talking about the hyaluronic. Its function in the body is to bind water and to lubricate movable parts of the body, such as joints. Okay? When you get into gross anatomy lab and you start to dissect an actual cadaver, first and foremost, always respect the cadaver. Always respect the sacrifice that they are making to allow us to learn. But after that, really I would keep a little list of things that you really want to look at. One of those being that when you open up the joint capsule of especially the larger joints, think about the knee, think about the shoulder, think about the parts of the ankle, think about the femur, those kind of spaces. Carefully open as you dissect the joint capsule off. See if you can find this kind of jello-like fluid and this super lubricated fluid within those types of spaces, because you will be able to find them. Specifically, hyaluronic acid is mostly associated with hyaline cartilage. Make that connection. Hyaluronic acid, hyaline cartilage. Hyaline cartilage gets its name from hyaluronic acid. We'll talk more about this in a future slide, but the hyaline cartilage covers the ends of the long bones where articulations occur. So anywhere that the long bones are coming together with other bones, whenever we're hitting wherever we have a place where bone would move along the bone, there's a protective layer of cartilage there to provide a cushioning effect. The hyaline cartilage has been called the gristle cartilage because it is more resistant to wear and tear, thanks to that structure with the hyaluronic acid and being able to hold on to a bunch of water. Okay, general characteristics of cartilage. Again, we always see chondroblasts. We have that pericardium, which we talked about. It secretes matrix. We're going to have lacunae. Again, remember lacunae being those little cave-like structures. So just like in where the osteocytes reside in lacunae, chondrocytes, chondroblasts also have these little lacunae, these little caves where they like to make their little home. Chondrocytes secrete the matrix, again, all that kind of good stuff. Okay. Here's just a little image kind of showing this. Whenever we look at the design, the perichondrium, remember the perichondrium, its purpose, it has that chondrogenic layer. So if it's producing chondrocytes, or it's producing cartilage, especially in those locations, we think that chondroblasts are primarily going to be there. So when we look at this, the chondrocytes are much, much bigger. The chondroblasts are a little bit smaller right in here, right along the line. Notice how the difference in color of these tissues. This tissue down here is much more pink when we talk about the staining of it. This is more purple and open. This is a little bit more, much more dense in comparison. So this denser structure is the perichondrium. The more open structure right there is the cartilage with the chondrocytes. And the cells are right along the line in between, these more flat cells, those are our chondroblasts. So diving into hyaline cartilage. So hyaline is a glassy, translucent, and it's also one of the most abundant types of cartilage. It's at we talk about this articular surface of the synovial joints. In the fetal skeleton, those bones that we talked about last week, how enchondral bone formation, like how bones are produced. Bones are first produced using hyaline cartilage, and then they are later, ossified through that whole process that we talked about. Creation of a bone collar, formation of a primary ossification center to then later have a secondary ossification center. That primary ossification center being in the diaphysis of the bone. The secondary ossification centers most often being in the epiphysis of those long bones. And then that gives us a physis where there's still active cartilage growing. So as the bone grows, in order to allow our bones to get to the proper length as we grow. Hyaline cartilage is also found in the respiratory ducts, in the costal cartilage, and the epiphyseal plate of growing long bones. This is a list, beautiful list, easy to make test questions come from this. So make sure that you spend a little bit of time. Make sure that you know where these are located and some of the most important things about them. So for example, the hyaline cartilage being at those articular surfaces, having a lot of water, having a lot of the hyaluronic acid, it has the perichondrium as well. So the perichondrium, again, being that cartilage producing layer, we need that in that epiphyseal plate, that epiphysis, that growth plate of growing long bones, in order to continue to lay down cartilage so that it can then later be ossified. Looking at the matrix of hyaline cartilage, I'm going to go back up here and pull this photo again right here. So in between all of this stuff, we have what's called interterritorial matrix and territorial matrix. So that's what we're going to be looking at right here. So within the matrix of hyaline cartilage, before we get to those two matrix, we're going to look at, there are fibrils. There are type 2 collagen fibrils. There's a bunch of ground substance, which include those proteoglycans, and a bunch of that water, keeping it highly hydrated. This also likes to be a test question. That it's a bunch of water. It's mostly water. It's 75% water. The territorial matrix is what immediately surrounds the chondrocytes. So these chondrocytes right here, this first little layer is the territorial matrix. Its job is to protect and support the chondrocytes. The interterritorial matrix is a little bit further away from chondrocytes. It's rich in collagen, lots and lots of collagen, to give strength and general structural support to all the rest of the cell. To the rest of the cartilage, I should say. Again, remember we talked about how cartilage itself does not have vessels, nerves, lymph vessels. So it has to get those nutrients and stuff somehow. It's through a process called diffusion. Diffusion is basically just going from something with a high concentration, it moves to a low concentration of something. Kind of like, you'll learn more about that in Physiology 1 next trimester. That's like the whole first week is diving into diffusion and osmosis, all that kind of stuff. But essentially diffusion is, like I said, going from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. You can think of it like if you take muddy water and clean water and you mix the two of them together, the mud doesn't just stay by itself, it intermixes with all of the clean water immediately, because all of those extra particulates floating inside of it, they don't want to be all stuck close together, so they immediately try to go from their high concentration area where they're all close stuck together, and they try to spread out and go to the new area of low concentration. This nutrition, this lack of ability, to have direct vessels and stuff, limits the thickness of the cartilage. The cartilage maintains a relatively thin layer because it cannot get the nutrients. If it gets too thick, that's when in the center of that cartilage, you're going to have chondrocytes that are no longer able to get nutrition, and they're going to die. Okay. Additional note, this is a great test question right here. The specific articular cartilage. So the cartilage is actually on the part of the bone where that's articulating with another surface. Those areas lack perichondrium as well. They get nutrition from something called synovial fluid, and it's thanks to the movement of the joints. It kind of pumps the synovial fluid, like the hydration, the water stuff inside of it, pumps it in and out just a little bit to allow nutrition of that cartilage. So kind of talking all about this is why when people damage cartilage, when somebody gets a meniscus tear, when somebody is dealing with something like osteoarthritis, these are conditions that are not truly reversible. So like that's why meniscus tears, if they're really painful, if they're really bothering somebody, causing other issues, they will go in and they'll clip part of the meniscus off. Whichever part is kind of dragging, whichever one is causing the difficulty in movement. And that's because there's no blood flow or direct blood flow, cartilage heals incredibly slow. Okay? So it can be very difficult if you have damage to cartilage in order for it to heal properly, and most often you're going to end up with some kind of longer term type issue. On that same note, we look at a condition like osteoarthritis, bone arthritis, itis meaning inflammation, so we have arthro meaning joint, so bony joint inflamed. So inflammation of a bony joint, essentially what we get is when we have constant weight bearing on joints, especially ones like the hips, the knees, the ankles, joints that we use a ton, the thumbs or police officers, their trigger finger, that kind of stuff. You can get what in the profession we would call wear and tear to those joints. A lot of other things can impact this, like your knees, like your running technique, the type of shoes that you wear, the surfaces that you're running on, whether you're overweight, whether you're underweight, whether you're also strength training, the strength of your bones, all these different components plays a factor. And I'm not going to spend too much more time on this. Just understand, osteoarthritis is due to the wear and tear and the breakdown of that articular cartilage in the joint, which then, because the cartilage is wearing away, just like in this picture, you get bone on bone, and we have periosteum on the bone surrounding the bone tissue, and the periosteum has lots of nerve endings. So then essentially we're scraping bone on bone, and that's going to cause pain signals to be produced. It's going to cause more inflammation. It's going to cause a lot of pain. These kind of patients, they do really, really well with movement, exercise, making sure that they get the appropriate amount of exercise for the knees and for the hips, putting a patient into a pool where it kind of takes some of the weight off, but you still get a lot of movement. Fantastic for these kind of patients. Again, you don't need to know all of that now, but it's good to start thinking and start to learn what we can. Here's just kind of an example of the grading of this, of how this progresses over time with weight bearing. You can see, especially right here, this is the femur coming down right here. This is the tibia. This is your fibula. The fibula is on the lateral part of your body, so it's on the outside. So this is the medial side. And you can see, especially on the medial side, these get closer and closer and closer as the hyaline cartilage kind of wears down over time. Okay, that was hyaline cartilage. Now we're going to talk about elastic cartilage. Elastic cartilage is similar to the hyaline cartilage in lots of different ways. It's essentially the same sort of structure, just that it contains elastic fibers, making it more flexible than the hyaline cartilage. 3 main places that we find it: the external ear, so if you go and you move your outer side of your ear around, you can kind of really bend it, twist it, and it goes right back to its shape. That is elastic cartilage. The eustachian tube, which is the drainage tube that kind of connects your ear to the nasal part of your brain. That's why if you hold your nose and you blow, or if you're going up in a plane and your ears pop, that's the pressure equalizing between those different parts of your body through the eustachian tube. And the epiglottis, which is the little flap that controls whether things go down into the stomach or they go into the lungs. So you want to make sure that that is always working super well. When you look at this, it looks very, very similar to the hyaline cartilage. Okay, so it looks similar to hyaline cartilage. The main difference, we think about elastic collagen. When we were talking about elastic collagen, it stains much differently. See how dark these little tree branch looking things are? Or like little worm looking things? That's the elastic component in the matrix. So that's the big difference, is that there's a lot more elastic fibers, a part of the elastic cartilage. Next is fibrocartilage. So elastic cartilage also does have perichondrium. Fibrocartilage does not have perichondrium at all. So when we damage fibrocartilage, it takes forever to heal, okay? It is very similar to dense, regular connective tissue and that dense, regular connective cartilage. The cells in the lacunae, they look like they're more aligned in rows rather than kind of just a big blob. These are the fibrocartilage located in the IVDs, the pubic symphysis, the TMJ, the menisci of the knee, the labrum of the glenohumeral joint, all these kind of places. And again, that's like I said, the menisci of the knee is because it's fibrocartilage, no perichondrium. There's no chance, really, of the meniscus being able to heal itself because it's not going to get the nutrients, not going to get the blood flow that it really needs. See these nice little neat rows of cells? That is our fibrocartilage. More nice little neat rows of the fibrocartilage. Here's just a picture kind of showing where it is. We have the fibrous cartilage. The annulus fibrosus is made up of it has fibrous cartilage inside of it, so this is where we have fibrous cartilage. And then we have the hyaline cartilage that's actually on either side in order to help with the movement, help to cushion. If we think about this, a lot of this, the nucleus pulposus and the hyaline cartilage, so much of it is made up of water that this is why hydration is super important. And actually, this whole region, the whole disc, receives its nutrients through a process called imbibation. Okay, it's a fun little word. Imbibation. Basically what that means is that when we're up and we're sitting or walking around all day, our spine compresses. And as we squeeze, as we deal with gravity, the discs get squeezed and water and fluid gets pushed out of the discs. When we lay down to sleep, our spine actually relaxes and opens up a little bit and sucks water back in. So that's one of the reasons why, getting enough sleep, sleeping position as well, those other kind of things have a really good has a pretty big impact, on what is our spine health and like what kind of pain and stuff that we feel and that we perceive. A lot of this is not super important. Kind of what I was just a little rant that I went on isn't super important for this class in specific, but for the future, you'll learn lots and lots and lots about the spine. So just like bone, cartilage grows in two ways, either through appositional growth, where the cartilage-forming cells in the perichondrium secrete matrix against external face of the existing cartilage. So new matrix is laid down on the surface of the cartilage. Or you have interstitial growth, where the chondrocytes within the lacunae divide and secrete new matrix, expanding cartilage from within. So it's kind of like right here we see, we have hyaline cartilage. This is that chondrogenic zone. So appositional growth is occurring from the edge of the cartilage. These chondroblasts are laying down matrix here from the edge, and it's pushing it out this way. It's pushing against the perichondrium to continue to grow it out this way. Interstitial growth is kind of the division of those chondrocytes themselves, and so the cartilage on the inside is dividing and producing more cartilage. So really the key takeaway, the big differentiating factor, appositional growth of cartilage occurs in the perichondrium. The interstitial occurs within the cartilage itself. That's what you need to know as far as differentiating the two of them. Other thing that you'll want to make sure that you know is that fibrocartilage cannot do appositional growth because it doesn't have a perichondrium. Here's a nice little picture just of some of this, of this appositional growth versus the interstitial growth. Interstitial growth is through mitosis, whichever the proper word is. Yeah, mitosis. So interstitial is through mitosis, and this is through the chondroblasts. Here's again just another picture demonstrating all of that. Finally, down here at the very bottom, just to wrap up, I put in a list right here kind of the differences between these two types of growth, so you can look at that. And then also a final table that really breaks down the main features of each type of the cartilage, just to make sure that you know the differences. Again, questions that you're typically going to get asked by teachers are going to be, the exceptions. So the presence of perichondrium, very likely that it's going to be asked because we know fibrocartilage does not have it. The main functions of each of these cartilage, this kind of goes along with, where they're located. So, the articular ends, the fetal skeleton, being in specifically in the ear and in the epiglottis. Fibrocartilage, we care most about, the intervertebral discs. We care lots about the pubic symphysis. We care about the insertions of tendons, all of these things. Those are the kind of, the main points I would focus on. This is a fantastic chart to study, which contains a lot of the information that we just went over. And that is it for cartilage. I do want to just mention one other thing that I think is kind of cool. So in more recent surgeries, I had the opportunity during my internship to actually scrub in on a couple of surgeries, one on an amputation and then one on an osteophyte removal surgery on the big toe, where I actually got to see them cut open that first joint of the big toe. You get to see everything. So one thing that they actually do, because there is not a lot of blood flow to the area of cartilage, anytime that they cut cartilage of any kind, they'll take a very, very small drill, a little needle almost, and just kind of poke or drill holes all along wherever they cut cartilage on either side, which causes increased inflammation, increased blood flow to that area to allow for better healing. That was just an extra little tidbit that I thought was really, really cool that I learned while I was doing my rotations. So, as always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them down below, or feel free to reach out to me directly. Thank you, and good luck studying.